This week we're moving on in our discussions to find out how it is the cells that we just learned about last week harvest energy from their environment and how they convert that energy into other forms of energy, say for example for storage and later use. Before we go into the specifics of how a cell accomplishes this, I need to define a few terms for you. First of all, the term energy. Now, energy is basically the ability to cause change or the ability to perform work. It can mean either. And there are two main types of energy, kinetic and potential energy. And probably the easiest way for me to explain the difference between kinetic and potential energy is to draw a picture for you. Imagine, if you will, that you walk up a very steep hill carrying a soccer ball, and you place that soccer ball at the top of the hill. Okay? The energy it took you to climb up that hill with the ball is kinetic energy. It's active energy, in other words. By comparison, potential energy is the energy that is now stored inside this soccer ball that's sitting at the top of the hill. Okay, the energy that's stored inside the soccer ball could be released if we just pushed that soccer ball down the hill. It would begin rolling until it reached the bottom. That stored energy for later use is potential energy. Now, when we talk about energy, we also need to understand a little bit about the rules which govern how energy behaves. And in order to do that, we have to refer to something called the Laws of Thermodynamics, which no doubt you've heard of before from previous chemistry or physics classes you had in high school or college. We're not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail, but I do want you to know the basic underlying concept for two of the laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics is called the conservation of energy law. And basically what this says is that energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. The only thing that we can do with energy is change it from one form to another. You can take, for example, the energy that's stored inside the bonds of a molecule of sugar, and we could change that into the energy of bonds stored inside a bunch of water molecules, for example, if we reorganize that glucose molecule into water molecules. But notice that I haven't created new energy, and I have not destroyed any energy. I just converted the energy from the form of bonds in a sugar molecule to bonds in water molecules. The second law of thermodynamics is also called the entropy law. And this basically says that any time I do that changing of energy from one form to another, I will not get a 100% transfer. Some of the energy that I'm converting from one form to another will always be lost in the form of heat. And that heat is basically lost in the environment. It's unusable energy. Okay, another way of saying this, if you've heard of entropy before, is that as we perform activities, we always release some energy into a form that becomes then unusable. In this case, the heat is the unusable form. So for example, if I take a sugar molecule, a glucose molecule, and I utilize the energy stored in that glucose molecule, which by the way would be potential energy, and I converted that energy into another form called ATP and utilized that form to cause muscle contraction. In other words, if I converted the potential energy into actual kinetic energy, I would not get a 100% transfer of the potential energy into kinetic energy, and as a result, some of that energy would be lost as heat to the environment. Okay, that's the second law of thermodynamics. You cannot change energy from one form to another, excuse me, without losing at least a little bit of that energy. All right, that's the end of sort of our few definitions we need to tackle. The next part 2 of this lecture, we're going to go into a little more depth about the ATP molecule and metabolic reactions.